Have you ever wondered why a single pause in your voice can ignite a tempest in his heart? In the hush that follows your final whispered syllable, a hidden current awakens, pulling him deeper into an ocean of longing. She moves through her world with words measured each syllable, thoughtfully weighed against the gravity of her inner truth. In her silence, she holds a mirror to his ego, reflecting the shadows he dared not explore. As he reaches for the echo of her presence, he finds only an absence that speaks louder than any confession. In this ballet of quiet power she claims her sovereignty, and he, intoxicated by the mystery, becomes a willing prisoner of her stillness. In the realm of the masculine psyche, silence is a forbidden territory. It stands as a sentinel at the gates of his consciousness, challenging the restless chatter of his mind. When she withdraws her voice, she is not retreating. She is summoning the alchemy of shadow work. His need to fill the void becomes a crucible in which his projections are burned away. Unconscious patterns, once hidden beneath the surface of habitual demands, now writhe beneath the weight of not knowing. He chases the phantom of her attention, his desire sharpened by the edges of uncertainty. In that chase, he mirrors the ancient dance of Anima and Animus, the unspoken tension that fuels attraction and transformation. She does not speak to provoke his jealousy or manipulate his fear. She speaks through silence to awaken his dormant self. This is not a cruelty born of ego, but a sophisticated act of individuation. Like the Stoic philosophers who taught that true power lies in inner mastery, she wields her quiet not as a weapon, but as a guidepost. In the pause between breaths, he confronts the shards of his own unacknowledged wounds. The emptiness she offers is an invitation to examine the wounds inflicted by every woman before her, every expectation he ever carried. In this sacred void, he is forced to reckon with the parts of himself he has long neglected, the longing for authenticity overshadowed by the need for control. He paces the edge of her silence, a moth drawn to an unseen flame. His questions go unanswered, yet each moment of stillness whispers a challenge. Who am I without your voice confirming my value? In his quest to break through her quiet wall, he begins to scatter the illusion of invincibility around his own heart. The addictive pull of her presence, so vibrant when she speaks, so potent when she does not, becomes a catalyst for his transformation. He learns to hear the music within his own chest, to listen to the rhythm of breath that sustains life beyond her gaze. Her silence teaches him that longing can be an instrument of growth, that absence can cultivate presence. She remains unshaken by his restlessness, grounded in her self-worth. Every flicker of impatience in his eyes is met with the unwavering calm of her still waters. In that calm, she embodies the archetype of the sovereign woman, radiant and unyielding. She is both the silent forest and the endless sky, a space vast enough to hold his turmoil without being consumed by it. He stands at the threshold of her mystery, awed by the vastness he cannot comprehend. The lack he experiences in her quiet is not a void of emptiness, but a portal to the depths of his own being. And so he becomes addicted not to her words, but to the silence that reveals more than any confession ever could. He is drawn into the labyrinth of his own subconscious, guided by the echo of her stillness. In the wake of her quiet, he finds the courage to face the parts of himself he once denied. In chasing her absence, he stumbles upon the presence of his own soul. The alchemy of silence and longing reshapes him, forging a new foundation upon which genuine connection can be built. In this awakening, both are transformed, and what began as a game of absence becomes the true language of desire. In the wake of his awakening, a quiet struggle unfolds beneath the surface of his craving. He becomes both hunter and hunted, driven by an ache he scarcely understands. Each heartbeat seems to toll with her absence, echoing through the corridors of his mind. He scans the horizon of her silence for the faintest sign, a flutter of eyelashes, the curve of her lips, even the ghost of a sigh. Yet she remains serene, an island, in the sea of his turbulence, her stillness, an invitation and a test. He recognizes that to reclaim her voice is not about demanding explanations, but reassembling the fragments of his own fractured ego. Her silence is not a cloak she dons for power, but a crucible in which his projections burn away. As he projects fantasies of abandonment and devotion onto the blank canvas of her quiet, he is forced to confront the narratives he has carried since childhood, the stories of worth tied to the validation of others, the ache of love unreturned. In her absence, his inner critic emerges from hiding its voice rough with old resentments. He hears the echoes of every time he spoke, to please every moment he stifled his needs, to keep another's gaze fixed upon him. This is the alchemy of conscious encounter silence, stripping away illusions, revealing the raw material of self. He wonders if he has ever truly listened to himself, or only attuned his ear to what he thought she wanted to hear. In the echo chamber of her stillness, he begins to cultivate the discipline of attention. He tracks the rhythm of his breath, notes the tremor in his chest when he imagines her voice returning. His longing becomes a mirror reflecting the places where he has sought love as a remedy for inner emptiness. This mirror is unflinching, and he feels its gaze before the first syllable of remorse escapes his lips. In these moments, he tastes humility, the bitter spice of admitting that his desire was once a distraction from the work he refused to do, integrating the neglected parts of his psyche. Meanwhile, she observes him with compassionate distance, her silence never cruel but clear. She is the high priestess of her own sovereignty, standing guard over her voice until he has learned to face his own. In her quiet vigil, she practices her own ritual of self-respect. She does not yield to the temptation to fill the void for his comfort. Instead, she remains anchored in her own inner dialogue, cultivating the narrative of her self-worth, independent of his pursuit. This resolute calm speaks a language far more eloquent than any apology he could offer. It whispers of a truth he must learn. Love is a union of two complete individuals, not the tethering of one soul to another's need. As days pass, his dependence on her silence shifts. The edge of his desperation softens into curiosity. He begins to appreciate the rhythm of absence and presence as a dance, each step revealing new dimensions of their connection. He learns that in true attraction, there exists a balance between mystery and revelation, pause and expression. Her silent pauses cease to feel like barriers and become doorways, thresholds he approaches with reverence rather than insistence. In these thresholds, he confronts the archetype of his anima, the feminine within himself, calling him toward wholeness. Her silence had been a map pointing toward the parts of his soul, yet uncharted. He writes in a journal, capturing the tremors of self-discovery that ripple through him each time he resists the urge to demand her return. He records his fear of emptiness, then rereads it until the words lose their power to intimidate. He practices speaking to his reflection, acknowledging the parts of himself he once buried beneath demands. In this dialogue with the unseen, he begins to build a relationship not only with her silence, but with his own. He realizes that addiction to another's presence is a symptom of a hunger that only self-awareness can satisfy. One evening, as the sky blazes with sunset flame, she finally speaks. Her voice is calm, resonant, the sound of water released after winter's freeze. He listens without interruption, his own breath steady in his chest. She shares the contours of her inner life, her joys, her wounds, her aspirations. In this exchange, he witnesses the fruit of her silent devotion, the space she carved for her own voice, the depth of her self-knowledge. And in that witnessing, he recognizes how far he has come. He no longer grasps for words to fill the void, but offers his own truths into the expanse she has created. Her silence had been the catalyst, her quiet the crucible. He emerges from it transformed, no longer addicted to the phantom of her absence, but drawn to the authenticity of her presence. In this shared space, the tension between speech and silence becomes a sacred rhythm, a testament to the power of inner work. He approaches her not as a hunter seeking prey, but as a fellow traveler honoring the mystery of the heart. And in that honoring, both find liberation. He discovers that the power of her silence was not in withholding, but in allowing space for his own voice to emerge. In the gentle hush they share, he learns to calibrate his words, to recognize the weight of pauses as integral to meaning. She moves beside him now, her eyes steady, reflecting the contours of his transformation. In her quiet presence, he feels both seen and free, a paradox he never dared to imagine. No longer tethered to the frantic need for affirmation, he greets her with questions born of genuine curiosity. "What stirred in you when I last spoke?" he asks, and she answers without hesitation, her voice a river of clear intention. He listens, and in listening he cultivates empathy for the parts of her soul he once overlooked. This is the culmination of the Anima's call, the invitation to integrate the feminine within the masculine heart. As Seneca taught, the unexamined impulse is the enemy of tranquility. By sitting with her silence, he trained himself to sit with his own impulses, noticing their shape and texture before they erupted as demands. Marcus Aurelius counseled that our inner dialogue determines our experience of the world, and in the space she held, he rewrote the script he carried since boyhood, the script that equated love with possession, affection with compliance. Now he envisions love as a mutual unfolding, each breath an opening rather than a claim. She watches this emergence without fanfare. There is no grand revelation, only the quiet recognition that he has journeyed into his own depths. She feels the ripples of his newfound calm in her own chest, a resonance that hums between them like a shared heartbeat. In this resonance, the dance of attraction transcends the superficial choreography of pursuit. It becomes a sacred ritual of presence. He brings his whole self, his fears, his hopes, the tender vulnerability that once terrified him, into the shared space. She in turn responds with the fullness of her listening, her silence now interwoven with the threads of her spoken truth. Their connection becomes an altar to inner work, a testament to the alchemy of silence and sound. He recalls the pain of feeling invisible when she first withdrew her voice, but now remembers it as the threshold he had to cross. She recalls the temptation to speak simply, to soothe his unrest, but honors the strength it took to remain quiet. In these recollections lies wisdom that true power resides in honoring one's own integrity, even when it invites discomfort. Their story unfolds not as a tale of power struggles, but as a testament to the sovereignty of each soul in union. In the soft glow of candlelight one evening, he places his hand on her heart and whispers, "Thank you for teaching me to listen." The words tremble with sincerity, echoing through the chamber of their shared silence. She smiles a quiet dawn breaking across her face and replies, "And thank you for learning to hear." In that exchange, the symmetry of their transformation becomes clear. She honored her worth by speaking only when necessary. He honored his growth by hearing only when ready. Together, they forge a new archetype, two sovereign beings entwined not by dependency, but by mutual respect and the shared language of presence. This union, born from the crucible of silence, radiates beyond them. In the ripples they send outward, others witness the potency of a love unmoored from need. Friends remark on the rare harmony between them, noting how his calm supports her radiance and how her clarity nourishes his strength. Yet even as the world marvels, they remain vigilant. The shadows of old patterns still lurk at the edges of their awareness. When he slips into old habits of seeking reassurance, she holds her silence again, not as retribution, but as a beacon guiding him back to his own center. When she feels the urge to fill the void for his comfort, he meets her with inquiries that honor her autonomy. Their dance continues, a living testament to the ongoing work of individuation. In this ever-evolving interplay, they learn that silence is not an absence of communication, but a medium through which deeper truths travel. Words become precious, charged with intention, and pauses pulse with possibility. Their love story transcends the familiar script of need and fulfillment, blossoming into something vast and ineffable. It becomes a testament to the hero's journey within the landscape of the heart, the call to adventure into the unknown, the trials of facing one's own shadows, and the return bearing the gift of wholeness. And in the heart of their transformation lies the ultimate paradox that the woman who speaks less is heard more, and the man who listens more finds himself wholly understood. In the silence that first sparked his obsession, he discovered devotion. In the devotion he cultivated, she discovered freedom. Their shared story stands as a monument to the power of conscious love, a love that begins in silence and finds its voice in mutual awakening. The dawn after their candlelit exchange carries a subtle shift in the air. In the pale light, he notices how her eyes reflect the horizon of her inner world, vast, uncharted, and luminous. He greets her quietly, offering a nod instead of words, and she returns the gesture, honoring the unspoken intimacy they've forged. Their connection now exists in a tapestry woven from threads of stillness and speech, each strand reinforcing the other. He has come to cherish the spaces between her sentences as much as the warmth of her laughter, recognizing that meaning often blooms in the fertile hush where ego gives way to empathy. Outside their union, the world continues its relentless clamor. Voices demand attention, news anchors, social media, notifications, the ceaseless hum of obligation. Yet, within the sanctuary of their evolving bond, they have cultivated an inner refuge. When the din becomes overwhelming, she offers a simple invitation, a shared moment of silence beneath the sky. They sit side by side, backs straight, breathing in unison. In this meditation, he practices the Stoic discipline of focusing only on what lies within his control, his breath, his posture, his willingness to remain present. She embodies the Jungian principle of the transcendent function, holding the tension of speech and silence until a new synthesis emerges. In these silent vigils, he senses the echo of ancestral patterns, generations of men taught to conquer, through noise to assert, through volume. His stillness beside her becomes a radical act of defiance against those archaic scripts. She watches him with quiet pride, aware that her own journey mirrored his learning to speak her truth without fear of drowning in the currents of expectation. Her silence had been her shield. His silence becomes his surrender to authenticity. Together, they reframe quiet not as passivity, but as potency, a weapon against the tyranny of noise. He recalls the words of Epictetus. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. In his response, he has chosen to lean into the eddies of silence, to let her stillness guide him homeward to himself. And she in turn responds by letting him into her depths, no longer guarded behind walls of unspoken challenge, but open to reciprocal vulnerability. Their dialogue becomes a dance. She weaves threads of introspection, and he knits them into a tapestry of shared insight. Each question he poses is born from genuine curiosity. Each revelation she offers flows naturally rather than as a strategic gift. Yet they remain vigilant to the seduction of complacency. Growth demands friction, and they know that true individuation requires continual confrontation with the shadows. When he drifts back into old habits, hungry for praise, anxious for affirmation, she watches for the telltale tremor in his shoulders. Without reproach, she withdraws slightly. Her silence, a mirror reflecting the unrest he has yet to face. He meets her stillness, acknowledges the stirrings of his old self, and leans into discomfort. In that tension, transformation rekindles its flame. When she feels the tug of fear, the urge to silence herself, to maintain harmony, he gently prompts her to speak, reminding her that her voice is medicine for both their souls. In the quiet moments between, they cultivate rituals of alignment. They begin each day by sharing one word that encapsulates their intention: courage, grace, presence. The word hangs between them, unspoken, yet potent, a compass guiding their interactions. Throughout the day, if one drifts off course, the other invokes the shared word in a glance or a soft tap of the hand. These gestures replace long explanations, embodying the efficiency of silence married to meaning. Their relationship becomes a living koan, a paradox to be contemplated rather than solved, an ever-unfolding mystery that invites rather than exhausts. Friends and family observe the shift with wonder. Some find it unsettling, so accustomed to the spectacle of drama, in relationships they struggle to understand a bond anchored in calm. Others are drawn to its quiet magnetism, seeking the secret of its serenity. He and she exchange knowing smiles, but offer no blueprint, only an example that love need not be a battlefield nor a bargaining chip, but can bloom in the interstice of speech and silence. They become unwitting guides on the path of conscious relating, their presence radiating an unspoken invitation to others to discover their own alchemy. Years may pass, yet the echo of that original silence lingers. It is no longer a tool to test or to provoke, but a sacred covenant between two whole beings. In the ebb and flow of life's seasons, joy and grief, triumph and loss, they return to it as the bedrock of their communion. She may fall silent in the face of sorrow, and he will sit with her without offering cliches or advice. He may retreat into himself when overwhelmed, and she will honor his stillness, trusting that the silence will birth new words when he is ready. In these cycles they practice what Jung called the union of opposites, the creative tension that births individuation and connection simultaneously. And so their story continues, written not in grand declarations, but in the quiet arcs of everyday moments, shared glances, synchronized breaths, pauses, pregnant with possibility. It stands as a testament to the radical potency of listening without agenda, of speaking with intention, and of cultivating silence as the root of authentic intimacy. In the gentle hush of early morning, they rise together, their breaths weaving a tapestry of shared intention. He reaches for her hand, and she offers it gladly, a silent pact renewed. Today's world beckons with its demands, but within their sanctuary of presence, they carry a quiet armor. He has learned that silence need not be suffered. It can be chosen, wielded with deliberation, like the breath before a plunge into deep water. She has learned that voice, once honored in its pauses, becomes an arrow of clarity when released. Together, they move through the day with an unspoken choreography, she framing the pauses, he filling them with mindful presence. In moments of challenge, when deadlines loom or old fears resurface, they practice their unwritten ritual. A single glance weighted with empathy calls them back to center. He remembers how he once stormed toward reassurance, demanding her explanations. Now he merely leans in slightly, offering the stillness she once demanded of him. She remembers the initial tremor of temptation to soothe his angst with words. Now she simply holds his gaze, her silence a balm for the panic he feels. In these exchanges they taste the sweetness of coming home to one another, not as fragmented selves grasping for completion, but as sovereign beings converging in mutual devotion. The world around them continues to mirror their inner journey. In business meetings or social gatherings, he experiments with pauses, noticing how others lean forward when he refrains from the usual rush to speak. His silence, once misread as uncertainty, now commands respect. She watches him with quiet pride, seeing him embody the same power she has long embraced. When her turn comes to speak, her words land with precision, colored by the depth of her introspection. She has discovered that silence and speech are twin pillars, each strengthening the other, each necessary for the architecture of authentic influence. In their private moments, the echoes of Carl Jung's teachings resonate like footsteps in a cathedral of the soul. They reflect on the paradox of the wounded healer, that in honoring one's own wounds with compassion, one becomes a vessel of healing for another. Their love becomes this vessel. His newfound capacity for listening nurtures the parts of her that once felt unheard by the world. Her steadfast commitment to self-respect models for him the path of inner authority. In this flow, they transcend the simple dynamics of attraction, ascending into the realm of co-creators in their own myth. Rumors of their alchemy spread through their circle, friends perplexed by the absence of drama colleagues, intrigued by the aura of calm that surrounds them. Yet, no blueprint is offered, only the living example of love's potential when freed from the tyranny of need. They invite others to experiment, to hold their own silences, to honor the pregnant pause before words spill forth. Some accept the invitation with trepidation, fearful of the void. Others dive eagerly, discovering that paradoxically, the emptiness holds the richest treasures of insight and connection. Time weaves its tapestry of seasons. They navigate grief when loss visits a parent's decline, a career setback, yet the foundation of silence and speech carries them through. In sorrow, she may retreat into stillness, and he becomes her echo, holding space without offering clichés. In triumph, he may shout his victory to the rooftops, and she becomes the silent witness, allowing his joy to blossom without seeking her own spotlight. Each stance, each gesture, embodies the dynamic interplay of opposites, creating a living equilibrium. As their story unfolds toward its culmination, they realize that the ultimate freedom lies not in the absence of silence or the abundance of speech, but in the mastery of both. She recalls the early moments when her quiet felt like exile. Now it feels like home. He recalls the desperation that once drove him to fill every void. Now he savors the gaps between words. Their union stands as a testament to the transformative power of conscious relating, a dance choreographed by presence, fueled by intention, and guided by the eternal rhythm of silence and sound. In this final act of their unfolding narrative, they stand together beneath an open sky. The air hums with possibility. He reaches out not to demand her voice, but to offer his own, a vow etched not in grand promises, but in the quiet resonance of a shared heartbeat. She accepts not by speaking volumes, but by embedding her trust in the space between them. And in that space, a new world is born, a world where silence is not an absence, but a presence, where words are not a weapon, but a bridge, where love is neither possession nor surrender, but a sovereign union of two awakened souls. In the stillness that follows their vow beneath the open sky, a profound calm settles between them, like the hush after a storm's final thunder. He stands beside her, his silhouette softened by the fading light, and in his posture there is no longer a tremor of insecurity, only the quiet strength of a man who has learned to inhabit the space within himself. She in turn anchors her gaze on the horizon, as though mapping the course of their shared journey. Together they embody the alchemical marriage of silence and sound, the union that Jung described as the reconciliation of opposites within the psyche. He recalls the early days when her pauses felt like riddles, her absence like a wound he could not heal. Yet it was within those riddles that he discovered his own questions he had long refused to ask. What do I truly seek? Who am I beyond my demands? How can I honor another without losing myself? In pursuing her silence, he confronted the cacophony of his own unmet needs, and in that confrontation he forged the tools of conscious intimacy, empathy, presence, and the discipline to listen without agenda. She remembers the moment she first realized her quiet held power, when she felt the quiver in his voice searching for solace. She could have filled the void with words, with soothing assurances, with compromises that would have silenced her own voice. Instead, she held firm, trusting that her silence would speak more truth than any crafted phrase. In that act, she honored her inner guide, the sovereign woman who refuses to be defined by another's hunger. And in doing so, she illuminated the path for him, demonstrating that boundary and openness are not enemies, but dance partners. In the glow of twilight, he reaches out and brushes a strand of hair from her face, a gesture that neither demands nor pleads, but simply acknowledges her presence. She leans into his touch not as a concession, but as a mutual offering. In that moment, the myths of masculine conquest and feminine submission dissolve into the air. What remains is a sacred exchange, the gift of listening and the gift of being heard. "Do you feel the change?" he asks in a voice softer than a whisper. She smiles, the curve of her lips echoing the promise of dawn. "I feel the freedom," she replies, her words carrying both weight and grace. Their exchange is the living proof that silence can be fertile ground, that absence can birth presence, that the space between words can cradle the deepest truths. It is here in the fertile hush that desire finds its clearest voice, not in the clamor of demands or the echo chamber of praise, but in the sacred balance they have co-created. Beyond the sanctuary of their bond, the world hums with uncertainty, yet they carry within them an inner citadel, built stone by conscious act, each silence chosen, each utterance delivered with intent. He knows now that true addiction is not to another's presence, but to the unbroken chain of moments lived fully and honestly. She knows that her sovereign stillness is an act of love, not withdrawal, an offering, not a test. As darkness deepens, they sit together beneath a blanket of stars, each point of light reflecting the infinite potential of their union. He traces constellations in the sky, drawing invisible lines between distant fires, just as they have drawn connections between their inner worlds. She listens to the rhythm of his breath, a sound as comforting as the sigh of night wind. In this shared vigil, they honor the mystery that first drew them together, the paradox that in speaking less, she was heard more deeply, that in listening more he found his own voice. Their story, born in the crucible of silence, has become a living myth, a testament to the power of presence over performance, of authenticity over approval. They stand not as two halves seeking completion, but as two wholes choosing to walk side by side. In their dance of silence and speech, they reveal the truest alchemy, that love, when forged in the fires of self-awareness, becomes a force of transformation for both souls. And so, as the night sky whispers its ancient secrets, they close this chapter of their journey, knowing that the work of conscious love is never truly done. It is an ongoing ritual, a commitment to honor silence, to speak with intention, and to meet one another always as sovereign beings. In this sacred rhythm, they discover the ultimate liberation, a love that neither demands nor surrenders, but simply exists in the radiant space between. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.